John Foster, and I wanted to hop on real quick and tell y'all the story about my cowboy hat. I've been getting some comments lately that aren't too pleased with the way it looks, and I just want to tell y'all the history behind it so y'all can get to know me a little bit better. One day I was shopping and hey everybody, it's John Foster here, and I am so incredibly glad to be back in my home state of Louisiana. American Idol was such an amazing ride, and to think that everything's just beginning is such a crazy thought.
You good? No. It's okay. I didn't quite catch the end of that.
As a developing story in American popular music, the rise of John Foster is anchored in a simple image that first caught national attention: an 18-year-old in a cowboy hat walking onto the American Idol stage, looking every inch the traditional country hopeful, while privately carrying a grief most adults never face. In interviews, social posts, and on-stage remarks gathered across his run, Foster consistently frames his journey around the loss of a childhood friend and the decision to make music that keeps her memory present. This report opens with that duality, presentation versus reality, because it explains the impact of what followed: a series of performances that sounded nostalgic but felt urgent, a teenager's poise filtered through a small-town upbringing, and a case study in how modern talent shows amplify stories that start far from television studios. What distinguishes Foster in a crowded field is not a stunt or viral gimmick, but a clear through line: the song as testimony. The initial audience reaction, curiosity first, loyalty later, tracks with patterns seen on Idol when a contestant marries craft with consequence. Viewers heard tone, then they learned context, then they stayed for character. In newsroom terms, that is the lead and the nut graph in one. An artist shaped by loss who refuses to treat the loss as marketing, choosing instead to talk softly and let the songs carry the weight. The sections that follow document where that weight came from, how it moved through a community, and why, when he finally spoke directly to the camera, it felt less like a pitch and more like a promise, setting up the chronology that defines the rest of this report. Records compiled from community profiles, school acknowledgments, and family business mentions place John Foster Benoit's early years in Addis, Louisiana, where the Benoit's country meat block operates as both a livelihood and a local landmark, the kind of small enterprise that doubles as a neighborhood bulletin board. Sources close to the family and educators familiar with his cohort describe a student who combined diligence with courtesy, graduating at the top of his class, an outcome that tracks with faculty comments about his consistency and drive. The musical influence map is straightforward. Standard bearers of classic country, George Jones, George Strait, Conway Twitty, and cross-generational icons like Elvis Presley, names that recur in Foster's stated inspirations and can be heard in his phrasing and repertoire choices. Faith practice is not presented as a publicity angle, but as everyday habit. He is a devout Catholic by his own account, a detail that later intersects with the content and tone of his most personal performance. By 16, he is self-teaching on guitar, a common origin story in American roots scenes, but the differentiator is intent. He frames the instrument as a tool for processing emotion, not merely as a ticket to a stage. After high school honors, he enrolls at Louisiana State University to study biology, telling multiple audiences he aspires to become a singing oncologist, a formulation that fuses vocation with service, and explains why his long-term plans never read as a retreat from music. These elements, family, faith, school, sound, form the baseline from which the later shock must be measured. In newsroom terms, they establish motive and means: the motive to honor, the means to translate feeling into song, and the context that makes his eventual public grief legible to a national audience. The inflection point arrives on New Year's Eve 2022 in a crash that reverberates through West Baton Rouge Parish and beyond. According to accounts carried by local reporting and community statements echoed in court records and family updates, 17-year-old Maggie Dunn and 16-year-old Caroline Gill lose their lives when an Addis police officer, engaged in a high-speed pursuit and traveling at a reported 80+ miles per hour, runs a red light and collides with their vehicle. Maggie's brother, Liam Dunn, survives with severe injuries requiring a prolonged hospital stay. The officer identified in this narrative as David Cathene based on the subject's provided text, later pleads guilty to 2 counts connected to the fatalities and to negligent injuring, drawing a sentence documented as 32 years with 22 suspended, an outcome that many in the Dunn and Gill circles publicly deem insufficient. The parents pursue civil action and broader policy scrutiny aimed at limiting or reforming pursuit protocols that, in their view, create disproportionate risk compared to the alleged offenses. For Foster, who describes Maggie as instrumental in my life, the loss is not an abstract tragedy but a personal fracture. The way he tells it, a portion of his own identity felt torn away. In journalist terms, this is the causal scene, the moment that transforms a promising student musician into a witness compelled to speak. It also becomes the ethical core of his later public messaging. Any success he achieves will carry a name with it. The next section examines how that intent left the page and became a song. Within days of the crash, Foster recounts retreating to Bayou Pigeon to find privacy for grief and prayer. He brings a guitar, not to perform, but to survive what he calls an overwhelming sadness that words alone cannot hold. The composition that follows, Tell That Angel I Love Her, is built with plain-spoken phrases. Though we may not know the reason, it's not for us to understand. Lord, won't you tell that angel I love her as soon as you can, and arrange to spotlight unvarnished voice over ornament. He later characterizes the song as the most beautiful yet the most horrific thing I've ever created, acknowledging the paradox many bereaved writers report, the way deepest pain can produce work of highest clarity. He also begins carrying a letter from Maggie, reading it for strength, before shows and in quiet moments of doubt, a detail that explains the steadiness viewers would notice months later when national pressure mounted. Notably, this composition predates his television exposure and therefore cannot be dismissed as reactive packaging. It functions as a document of record for his private mourning. The newsroom frame here is simple. An artifact emerges that both preserves memory and prepares a young artist for a public he did not expect to address so soon. In subsequent appearances and interviews, he consistently presents the song as a lifeline rather than a career play, and that framing, sincere, unforced, becomes persuasive evidence when audiences assess intent, setting up the conditions under which a reality competition platform might become a memorial stage. Prior to his American Idol campaign, Foster is not anonymous in regional circuits. He performs on bills with established names such as Doug Stone and John Schneider, a pairing that affirms his traditional orientation and offers him practical reps in front of paying audiences. In 2022, he releases Someone to Sing To, a debut single that earns recognition from Showtreff International in Germany as a traditional songwriter awardee. Modest by global chart standards, but meaningful within the niche that values classic forms and narrative craft. Local press notices begin to accumulate, and his social media footprint grows not through manufactured controversy, but through clips that emphasize timbre, diction, and throwback sensibility. Industry veterans note that this lane, neo-traditional country presented by a Gen Z artist, is underpopulated, which increases the odds that a television showcase could translate into touring demand if handled carefully. The pre-Idol dossier also includes early testimonies from teachers and neighbors regarding his diligence and manners, independent validators that become useful when rumor cycles later attempt to recast his biography. In the context of a newsroom package, these details demonstrate that Foster's televised audition did not emerge from a vacuum, but from a two-part foundation: a grieving songwriter with a purpose song already in hand, and a working performer with just enough stage time to stand upright under bright lights. With that preface documented, the report turns to Nashville. The audition sequence unfolds in the expected beats and then deviates at a key moment. Foster arrives with a gesture of hospitality, coolers stocked with Cajun food from his family's shop, an introduction to his sense of place as much as to his palate. He opens with Alan Jackson's Don't Rock the Jukebox, a lively selection that spotlights comfort and charm, but risks coming off as surface level. At the judge's request, Carrie Underwood calls for something that reveals more. He strips down to Conway Twitty's Goodbye Time, a standard that leaves little room to hide. The room changes. Luke Bryan, initially cautious, tags him a wild card, a label that contains both skepticism and intrigue, while Lionel Richie's reaction suggests recognition of a tone that feels older than the birth year on his forms. The golden ticket follows. In Hollywood, he selects Jamie Johnson's In Color for Showstoppers, another narrative-rich choice, then travels to Hawaii and leans again on Don't Rock the Jukebox, earning praise for feel and a gentle nudge to widen range. Across these rounds, the pattern is consistent. Foster privileges songs with bones, clear story, classic chord movement, space for breath, and accepts feedback without dramatics. The news value here is the pivot, a strategic willingness to adjust on command, which is often the difference between novelty and longevity on formats that compress artist development into weeks. That adaptability becomes crucial when the most personal decision of his season arrives. On April 20th, during the Songs of Faith episode, Foster steps to center stage with Tell That Angel I Love Her, the piece he wrote in the wake of the crash. What happens next reads like a composite of the show's most resonant moments. A young voice quivers, holds, and finishes. A close-up finds honest tears. A signature line lands. A name, Maggie, is spoken into the lens, converting millions of living rooms into a vigil. In the audience, Maggie's mother, Erin, holds a sign that remembers both her daughter and Caroline. Later, she will describe the moment with humor edged in pain, calling her reaction all snot and ugly tears, a phrase that underlines the sincerity of the scene. The performance climbs past 21,000 views quickly and draws comments comparing Foster to George Strait and Dwight Yoakam on tone, while Carrie Underwood publicly praises his traditional lane and the tenderness of his delivery. Luke Bryan's earlier doubts are framed by viewers as resolved. The voting public moves him forward into the top 14, confirming that the risk did not repel casual fans, but converted them. In analysis terms, this is the arc's turning point. The private memorial becomes a public artifact. The story and the song fuse, and the contestant becomes, in the eyes of many, an artist. The next beats test whether that identity can carry through themed rounds and a finale built for spectacle. The subsequent performance log reads like a survey of American radio memory conducted by a young curator. Top 14, Elvis Presley's Jailhouse Rock, a tempo gamble that shows he can command a stage without sacrificing tone. Top 12, I Told You So, aligning with Carrie Underwood and Randy Travis in one move and threading reverence with present tense phrasing. Top 10, Bonnie Raitt's Something to Talk About, a cross-genre step that broadens audience without abandoning core. Top 8, Brooks and Dunn's Neon Moon, a return to the narrative comfort zone and an intentional reset toward his base. In the finale, he escalates with a three-part statement, Toby Keith's Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue as a high-impact opener, a Luke Bryan duet on Deeper Than the Holler that functions as both mentorship and endorsement, and a reprise of Tell That Angel I Love Her, the closer that brings the season back to where his heart began. When votes are tallied, the title goes to Jamal Roberts. Reaction splits along predictable lines. Some viewers argue Foster was robbed, others praise the winner, while a significant block highlights Foster's composure in defeat. Handshakes, congratulations, thanks to supporters, behaviors that often predict post-show career stability. For the record, a crown is not the only metric that matters in this format. Sustained demand and credible identity frequently outlast single-season headlines. The following section addresses how that identity held up under rumor pressure. In the weeks bracketing the finale, social platforms recycle a familiar rumor kit claims that Foster is 24, that he is from Kentucky rather than Louisiana, that he is already signed to a label, or that he maintains a family link to Dwight Yoakam. Instead of ignoring the chatter or feeding it, Foster posts a single clarifying note on April 30th. He is 18, he is from Addis, Louisiana, and he is not signed. The statement includes no theatrics and names no antagonists. It reads like a record correction, not a fight. The effect is measurable in sentiment. Fans cite the post as evidence of humility and straightforwardness, characteristics already projected by his on-air persona and reinforced by hometown accounts. In media literacy terms, the move demonstrates an understanding of narrative control without courting additional cycles. It shuts down 3 myths with 1 paragraph and returns attention to the work. At the same time, curious onlookers test the claims against his catalog and public schedule and find coherence. No sudden label-polished pivot, no mysterious bio revisions, no opportunistic genre hops. For newsroom purposes, the item is brief but useful. It closes the loop on identity questions and helps explain why subsequent coverage skews toward the music rather than the noise. With the season closed and the online fog thinned, the story returns to where it started, a small town that decided to make a very big sound. Post-season, Addis stages a celebration that locals describe as a parade measuring in the 5-figure range. Evidence that televised exposure has translated into civic pride and tangible turnout. Addis proud signs appear across the community, and the Benoit shop becomes both a waypoint and a symbol, proof that a national platform can amplify, not erase, local roots. Meanwhile, Foster splits time between LSU coursework in biology and a growing slate of musical obligations, outlining intentions to keep education and art in parallel, an approach consistent with his singing oncologist formulation. Original songs inch up iTunes charts, an indicator of direct-to-fan traction that matters for booking agents and independent promoters. In the broader circle touched by the 2022 crash, Maggie's father launches the Maggie Dunn Foundation to support bereaved parents, while Aaron Martin voices hope that Foster's widely seen tribute will contribute to policy discussions around pursuit protocols. Her remark, "The greatest gift you can give a bereaved parent is to say their names," functions as both a thank you and a directive, and it clarifies why Foster continues to include a tribute in high-visibility sets. From a reporter's vantage, the conclusion is clear: whether or not trophies accumulate, the measurable outcomes are community cohesion, audience trust, and a catalog anchored by a song that means what it says. The likely next steps, new releases, regional tours, and selective national dates, will test scale, but the core narrative is stable: a young artist who turned grief into a living memorial, and in doing so, found a voice that carries beyond the bayou, a story that this newsroom will continue to follow as additional milestones arrive.